Here's a question. What do you think happens when we die? I don't mean after you die, like you go to heaven or something like that. I mean like in the moment that you die. What happens? Do the lights just go out? Or is it going to be like that last episode of Lost where Jack is entering this church and greeting all of his friends sort of half-consciously, looking up at a divine light that's ushering him into the afterlife, while also dying in the jungle at the same time next to a dog? Spoilers for Lost, by the way. R.I.P. network television. Today, I want to talk about Bullet in the Brain by Tobias Wolff. Easily one of the deepest short stories ever written. In just 7 pages, Wolff is able to tell this parable about not just literal death, but the slow, metaphorical death of the inner child that we all slowly tamp down over time. Let's get into it. In order to crack the nectarous nut that is Bullet in the Brain, I'm going to be doing an analysis based on George Saunders' method of short story analysis that he outlines in A Swim in the Pond in the Rain, his manual on creative writing.
Oh, today is a beautiful day, but not for you.
Saunders advocates for a page-by-page analysis of an author's writing, slowly and methodically taking in each detail as the author presents them to us, pausing and noticing our reactions to each of those facts as they're presented. We then take note of those and observe as the author either meets or subverts our expectations as he creates them. Hopefully always in a way that is satisfying. So the protagonist of this story is called Anders, and right away in a display of the mastery that Wolff commands of efficient storytelling, we get the sense of what kind of person Anders is, and also the kind of situation that he's in. Anders couldn't get to the bank until just before it closed, so of course the line was endless, and he got stuck behind 2 women whose loud, stupid conversation put him in a murderous temper. So right away, we understand that Anders is stuck in the kind of monotonous, boring situation that we can all relate to and sympathize with. But we also get the sense that he is the kind of person to be especially irked by such a situation. He calls the women in front of him loud and stupid, but we get the sense that that's more of a reflection of him and his attitudes rather than a true statement about how these women actually are. We learn that Anders is a literary critic and that he's essentially always in a bad mood. And he's known for the weary, elegant savagery with which he dispatches almost everything he reviewed.
Rubbish, only good for the dustbin.
Then, as the line for the bank teller is still really long, we see that one of the tellers actually closes her station and goes on break, and one of these loud and stupid women turns around to complain to Anders. Anders had conceived of his own towering hatred of the teller, but he immediately turned it on the presumptuous crybaby in front of him, and then he delivers a mean-spirited, sarcastic remark. And that's the first page. So, what's happened so far? We're introduced to a moody literary critic. He's stuck in line with people he detests for perhaps good, but we suspect not so good reasons. Then we learn that that portrait of a man is not only accurate, but it's intensified as we learn that he's not just a moody grump, but he's also a total hypocrite, as he chastises the women in front of him for sharing exactly the same hatred for the teller that he has. If we were to rewrite this first page as a series of phrases and questions, we might get something like this. There once was a man online in a bank, frustrated with waiting and listening to the loud, stupid people in front of him. Is the man justified in his anger? Or is the man always angry like this? He is not justified. He is, in fact, always angry like this, and he even tries to be unnecessarily cruel. What is the cause of this man's bitterness? And will he be able to overcome it through the rest of the story? If the answer were yes, he will overcome his bitterness and, say, fall in love with the woman in front of him, realizing that he was wrong to be so judgmental at first, and realizing that she's actually a wonderful person, we might feel cheated, like the story was cliché. Hopefully, Wolff has something a little bit more interesting in mind. Let's continue. Anders and the woman exchange a couple of remarks, And then something happens. The story changes. A couple of men wearing ski masks enter the bank with guns. "Keep your big mouth shut," one of them yells. "One of you tellers hits the alarm, you're all dead meat. Got it?" "Oh, bravo," Anders said. "Dead meat." He turned to the woman in front of him. "Great script, eh?" And the robbery proceeds. Now the situation has completely changed. Wolff has taken a portrait of the mundane banality of modern American society and blown it wide open with the intrusion of exciting violence. How, we wonder, is our curmudgeon-y literary critic going to react? Will he snap out of it? Will he snatch the gun from the robber's hands and save the day? Will he maybe reveal himself to be a truly horrid psycho and knock the women down to the ground so that he can save himself? Wolff doesn't do any of that. Instead, Anders continues his tired old cynicism. Even the extraordinary, life-threatening circumstances of a bank robbery has completely failed to shake Anders. He continues to be a classic, archetypical literary critic. Now, you might feel like that's kind of dumb.
That's stupid.
Like, this is too big of a departure from reality. No longer believable.
Random.
And that would be a fair enough reaction. But I believe that Wolff is doing this for a reason. He's a master of his craft. He does everything for some sort of reason. With Anders' literally incredible behavior, Wolff is signaling to us that he has something more interesting in mind than a simple bank robbery narrative. No, this is metafiction. Anders is not just reacting to the robbers, he's reacting to the text itself, criticizing it, unimpressed with its plot and its dialogue even as it unfolds. Anders is a stand-in for Wolff's inner literary critic. You'll see what I mean in a little bit. If you're still skeptical, just hang on. I'll prove it to you. The story goes on and Anders persists in making his snide, sarcastic remarks as the robbery is going on. So much so that he ends up drawing the attention of one of the robbers. "Hey, bright boy, did I tell you to talk? Did you hear that?" Anders says. Bright boy. Straight out of The Killers. The robber then comes up to him and points the gun at Anders' belly, and he continues to speak in these kind of trite, played-out expressions. "You think I'm playing games?" he says. The feeling of the gun against Anders' belly actually starts to tickle, and as the robber is threatening Anders' life, he's resisting the urge to start cracking up hysterically. And I mean, this is completely absurd. Nobody would behave like this. Anders is not just a normal person. He's not just a normal literary critic. He's a caricature of the archetypical literary critic, completely unable to be moved by anything. And also, did you catch that reference to The Killers? The Killers is a short story by Hemingway, probably one of his most respected. And Hemingway was no doubt a huge influence on Wolff's punchy, short, pithy style of writing. Anders finds it hilarious that the robber would speak in recycled Hemingway lines. But think about it. Are we supposed to believe that the robber read The Killers by Hemingway? Or are we supposed to believe that he's quoting him accidentally? Who says bright boy? Nobody says bright boy. I think it's more likely that Anders is actually laughing at Wolff and his inability to invent clever and original dialogue. And we might sympathize with Anders in this way. We too are waiting to be moved by the story. So far, all we have are a cliched, jaded literary critic and some robbers that speak in trite, recycled lines from Hemingway, or worse, just boring dialogue that any writer could crap out without a second's thought. I want to push this even a little bit further. The tension between Anders and the robber is a metaphor for the tension between Wolff and the reader. It's as if Wolff is looking at us and saying, "How about a bank robbery? Is that exciting?" And we're looking back at him and yawning. Not really. I don't think so. How to resolve this tension, we wonder. A sudden outburst of heroics from Anders now seems pretty impossible, and him getting shot by the robber seems more and more likely, but that would be a pretty unsatisfying ending, right? So how is Wolff going to paint himself out of this corner? Back to the story. So in order to avoid cracking up, the robber sort of forces Anders to look up at the ceiling, and Anders being Anders, he only notices how poorly painted the ceiling is. And as he's looking up at the details of the ceiling, he sort of scoffs. And by now the robber has completely had it with Anders. "Fuck with me again and your history. Capiche?" Anders burst out laughing. He covered his mouth with both hands and said, I'm sorry. Then snorted helplessly through his fingers and said, "Capiche? Oh god, capiche? And at that, the man with the pistol raised the pistol and shot Anders in the head.
As far back as I can remember, into earliest childhood, I've always been absolutely fascinated with the idea of death. Now, you may think that's kind of morbid, but you know when a child at night says the phrase, "If I should die before I wake," there's something about it that's absolutely weird. What would it be like to go to sleep and never wake up? Now, most reasonable people just dismiss the thought. They say, you can't imagine that. They shrug their shoulders and say, well, that'll be that. But I suppose I'm one of those ornery people who aren't content with an answer like that.
Finally, this game of chicken between Wolff and the reader is over, and he's managed to do what we were always hoping that he would do. That is, something interesting with the story. Interesting, but also seemingly inevitable. It's exactly what the logic of the story was demanding. He killed his main character. Good. He was asking for it. I mean, come on. But there's 2.5 more pages left of the story. Where do we go now? Will the women in line sigh in relief? Is everybody going to applaud, thank you for killing the annoying, jaded, literary critic character? None of that. Instead, the story goes glacial. A bit of white space to separate sections indicates that we're onto something else now. Wolff describes how the bullet enters the brain, shattering the bone and exiting behind the ear. But before any of this occurred, though, the first appearance of the bullet in the cerebrum set off a crackling of ion transports and neurotransmissions. After striking the cranium, the bullet was traveling at 900 feet per second, a pathetically sluggish, glacial pace compared to the synaptic lightning that flashed around it. Once in the brain, that is, the bullet came under the mediation of brain time. Wolff suspends us in the frozen moment of Anders' death, and likewise reflects that move by lengthening the sentences and lengthening the paragraphs, slowing the pace of the story way down. We too come under the mediation of brain time, and we're told that in this moment there's something that comes up in Anders' brain, a memory. The memory, in a phrase Anders would have abhorred, passed before his eyes. But before we get that memory, Wolff, in a rather clever move, gives us a list of all of the things that did not occur to Anders in his final moment. He doesn't think of lovers or his wife, who he had also loved before she exhausted him with her predictability, nor did he think of his daughter, or any of the poetry he had memorized, or even of his mother's dying words. These are all things that we might have expected, but that would have been disappointing because they're too predictable. It's almost like Wolff himself is giving himself a list of like, no, don't do that, no, not that, we shouldn't do this one. The list goes on. And as it does, we see the entirety of Anders' life play out. Shit. Damn it. We good. Where was I? We finally get to see Anders in all of his true humanity. We see that he attempted to take his own life as a young man. We see that he was once an idealist, protesting in the streets. We see that he fell out of love with literature and began to regard the books that he was reading not with interest and excitement, but with boredom. The descent into cynicism culminates in the line, "He did not remember when everything began to remind him of something else." What Anders does remember is one simple afternoon playing baseball with his friends. One of the boys says something that has wormed its way into Anders' mind and asserted itself at this last, final moment of his life. "Shortstop," the boy says. "Shortstop's the best position they is." Anders, as a boy, is struck with this part of the phrase, "they is." Those words, their pure unexpectedness. Their music. The bullet has already entered the brain. It won't be outrun forever, or charmed to a halt. In the end, it will do its work, and leave the troubled skull behind, dragging its comet's tail of memory and hope and talent and love into the marbled hall of commerce. That can't be helped. But for now, Anders can still make time. Time for the boy in right field to smack his sweat-blackened mitt and softly chant, "They is, they is, they is." Bullet in the Brain is Tobias Wolff's lament for the all-too-common evolution from idealistic youth into jaded old age. We lose sight of those things that initially strike us with their unexpectedness and their music, and eventually, everything just reminds us of something else. Try not to forget the things that inspire you. Chant them to yourself in those precious moments of extended stillness and silence. They is. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.